You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? If you can figure out what I wrote, I'll give you $10,000. I swear to the Lord, actually. Now, the reason why I say it is because apparently, if you can hear a keyboard in today's day and age, you now, I guess, can figure out passwords. At least this is what this fear-mongering little headline came at me. Streamers at risk as AI can guess passwords based on the sound of the keys being pressed. Now, immediately when I heard this, I was like, oh boy, another vector for creators to get hacked through. Forget creators for a minute. Are you somebody that just streams? Are you somebody that's on a Zoom meeting with a shady person? I know that's not an everyday thing. Well, apparently, if people can hear your keystrokes, I guess they can hack your passwords. So I wanted to cut right into the heart of this and basically read exactly where this information came from. Now, this is a paper from August 3rd, 2023. So, ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't exactly new information. I don't know why it took 2 years for this to become a scary thing for people to look at. But what they said was, with recent developments in deep learning, the ubiquity of microphones, and the rise in online services via personal devices, acoustic side channel attacks present a greater threat to keyboards than ever. This paper presents a practical implementation of the state-of-the-art deep learning model to identify laptop keystrokes, okay? So basically, the logic is, as long as you've got your phone, all right, sitting next with its microphone to a keyboard, I guess you can pick up the distinct sounds a keyboard makes with every single keystroke, and using AI, you can figure out, ooh, wait a minute, I see what keystroke got pressed. So generally speaking, let's say you're a streamer, yada, 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 you're sitting around, you go to the, sign-in page for your actual account. So for instance, this is my test login for my Nintendo account. And then when it comes to the password, most streamers will just, throw up a little bit of a mosaic. Maybe they'll switch to their face, and then they'll type in their password. And then hit enter. Now, of course, I've done this on camera a few times. I've done this, obviously, on streams. Now, again, generally speaking, a password will look like this. But I guess utilizing the AI, they can figure out exactly what you put in. So, all right, according to this, all right, let's actually see what's going on. Now, if you look carefully at the actual attack here, I'm going to read through the information just to translate it for the average audience. This is 6 keystrokes put into an actual system. They've got the time, they've got the decibels of audio, and of course, if you look carefully at it, it seems as though every single key they pressed produces somewhat of a different sound. They've got things like the energy and threshold, the threshold flags, everything over here. And again, this is where they isolate every single keystroke imaginable. Now, the reason why this information is important is this is what the computer sees, okay? The computer looks at each and every single one of these spectrograms and identifies, whoa, this is a different button pressed than that button. Because, I've never really, thought about it, but, generally speaking, when you're on a keyboard, I guess realistically, if you, probably hit different keys, you would hear actual different audio. So, for instance, it's kind of hard to pick up on it, but if that's the A key, this would be the L key. Yeah, they actually do kind of sound different. Actually, it's not too. It's actually weird. They don't really sound exactly the same. So of course, at this moment in time, what these actual researchers did was they actually put together a deep learning model based off of, again, all of this data, right? So they captured the audio with WAV files with a smartphone. In fact, closer speaking, this is exactly the setup that they had. So apparently, according to them, they had this MacBook Pro sitting over here, the same laptop that I typically use when I'm doing any form of editing. So they used this specific laptop. They used a phone literally right next to it, and this was done in an entire clean room situation. So no desk fans, no other ambient forms of audio. It was literally just a laptop and a microphone picking it up from that distance, all right? Even the cloth that they put on was to remove desk vibration. Now again, I'm sure some of you guys probably watching are picking up the subtleties of this research. Obviously, this is a very controlled situation, okay? So when I was reading that streamers were in danger, realistically, how many people leave their phones on microfiber cloths? I think you'll find tons of videos where I just leave it entirely on the desk. It is what it is, just like most people would do. So when it came time to see like how good and how like, efficient this was, according to their accuracy, they were hitting 95%, identifiers when it came to like identifying the keystrokes on that MacBook. Now that's actually kind of insane, but then again, this is a very controlled environment. So they actually do say it right over here. While the MacBook's keystrokes were found to be slightly easier to classify, both keyboards rely on a similar positional layout and are therefore similarly classifiable when recorded with external microphones. With regards to overall susceptibility to an attack, the quieter MacBook keystrokes may prove harder to record or isolate. Yeah, no shit. If somebody types like, they're very quiet. Like if somebody pushes like this on their keyboard, I'm actually typing entire sentences. No, really, I'm just hitting keystrokes. You're not going to be able to identify it because, again, it's too quiet to pick up these subtleties between it. But again, if somebody was generally typing with some actual general force, you could easily pick up on that with the microphones. And that could be used in an actual like model over here. So when they were using Skype, fucking rest in pepperonis, bitch. Additionally, they received an accuracy of 91.7%. So the quality was obviously not entirely there. And obviously, when you're over things like Zoom, right, where you'll probably be talking to somebody that you're trying to attack, this might be something more sensible to like, some scammer that has you over a Zoom meeting or TeamViewer, something you've seen on like Scammer Payback, something of that nature. This is where they'll probably try to pick up on things like password, just data capture that they can use for later cracking down the road. So yeah, point is, just with a phone recorded keystroke, they ended up getting 95% accuracy. That means 95% of the times the AI was able to actually identify what button you pushed on a keyboard. And when you were using over Zoom or Skype, which would obviously have audio problems or audio like, I guess you could say the audio would be a little bit damaged with directly compared to like a phone capture, that would go down to 93%. But overall, these are some pretty alarming numbers. Now again, this is where the problem of this hack basically not being the biggest risk to a streamer. First off, I don't see most streamers utilizing a MacBook Pro to stream, but let's assume that, the actual people behind it, if they wanted to target streamers, there's nothing that stops an individual from going and searching what are the most top-end brands of keyboards that a, live streamer would use. And there's a good chance that most of your favorite streamers probably use like a Razer keyboard, or they use like a Steel, like I personally have a SteelSeries, I think it's like an Apex 7 or something. It's the one with the OLED on the top right. Given that I'm telling you guys about AI keyboard hacks, it's really good that I'm telling you exactly what keyboard that I have. But generally speaking, you can pick up any popular mechanical keyboard or just any keyboard in general, and you can feed all of their various audio fingerprints, and fingerprints I'm using for their keystrokes, and use all of that as training data to basically create, I guess you could say, a AI that would help you identify based on several different sets of keyboard noises. And obviously in this paper, they were obviously factoring in distance between keystrokes, so they were using a lot of trickery to roughly identify how somebody would be inputting text into their system, and based on the audio heard, what key would be pressed in. Now, there's two ways to avoid this, okay? Actually, three ways if you're a streamer or just any regular person. You can just mute the fucking microphone, okay, without any audio. How the fuck would you know what somebody's saying? Second of all, you can do the on-screen keyboard, so you can, you fire up the on-screen keyboard, switch off the screen, and just click your password in. But that seems incredibly medieval. What you can't just do is just fucking use a password manager, silly. There's a free one called Bitwarden that you can install. I'm not paid by them or anything, but goddamn, if you're not using a password manager, hell, if you weren't using one for the last 5-6 years, you're kind of doing the internet all wrong. Use a password manager, let it generate some really convoluted passwords for you, and then you never even have to type them in. It usually just autofills for you, okay? Or better yet, it just uses your phone's biometric scanner, fingerprints, face Face ID, whatever, rectal fingerprint, I don't know. But it'll just use that and autofill or verify for you. Simple as that. You don't really have to worry about this if you're a streamer. Don't fall for the clickbait. It's an interesting pattern of attack, but it's not something that I really think is going to be that scary. The only reason you're hearing about it is because this is something that the NSA and the CIA were actually known to be using back in the day. Now, when I mention the CIA specifically, this is going to kind of blow your mind off, but to give you an idea, I don't know if I've ever talked about this conspiracy, but I'm sure you guys have heard it. It's a pretty satirical one, but they call it birds aren't real, okay? So the principal idea here is that all the birds that are flying around in the air are actually just like surveillance drones that are capturing, you know, us, all right? There's just surveillance drones that are like identifying us. Obviously, we know if the government wants to see you at all, they've got satellite feeds. Hell, they could fly a drone above your house and you probably wouldn't even be able to identify it in due time. But the reality of it is, this satirical conspiracy actually does have some real weight to it. So for anybody that doesn't know, back in the day there was Operation Acoustic Kitty. And this is an excerpt from the Central Intelligence Agency, where they were actually trying to train cats in order to be spies for them. So I'm not joking when I say this, okay? You might be like, what? What are you talking about? No, seriously. Our final examination of trained cats for, I guess, intelligence use in the field convinced us that the program would not lend itself in a practical sense to our highly specialized needs. Yes, the CIA has very specialized needs, okay? Especially when it comes to spying on people that are their adversaries. So repeated checks on the state of training and equipment showed us that it is indeed possible to train. Locations we were not able to visualize, use of this technique under conditions that prevail, we have satisfied ourselves that it is indeed possible. This is in itself a remarkable scientific achievement, knowing that cats can indeed be trained to move short distances. So there's a fair amount of stuff that's completely redacted from this information. I'm sure something useful came out of this, but generally it was a program that completely ended up failing. Now, the idea for these cats was that you would send it into the Kremlin or the Soviet embassies at the time. So what would happen was a vet apparently put a microphone into the cat's ear canal. They put a small radio transmitter at the base of its skull and a thin wire into its fur. So yes, this would basically be the first kitty cat that would turn out to be like a cybernetically enhanced spy bot. This would allow the cat to innocuously record and transmit sound from its surrounding. Due to the problems with distraction, the cat's sense of hunger had to be addressed in other operations. So what is really important here is that this project cost the CIA, actually, you know what? Cost the American taxpayer $20 million US. And this is 20 million of money from back in the 60s. So this is a fair amount of money they put down to try to train spy cats. Now, if you ever wonder, wow, where does my money go every year in the tax pool? Don't worry, millions of dollars are burned on some of the dumbest sounding projects you could imagine. Yeah, the CIA really did think that sending microphones around was really going to help. Now, if this functioned successfully, you would have a pair of spooky spying pussies running around capturing keystrokes that the CIA could grab, maybe send over to their friends at the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, and using their crazy AIs, probably decrypt a bunch of passwords that belong to terrorists, drug lords, journalists, anyone the CIA really didn't like. But obviously, because of a cat being a cat, this was never an achievable goal. But the thing about it is, this form of side channel acoustic hacking that we read is actually something that we've talked about for quite a long time. And it's not something that is out of the realm of agencies like the National Security Agency or really any, person in cybersecurity trying to attempt or at least somewhat toy around with if it meant using it to gain, a password, whether it be for good reasons or, very nefarious reasons. What we've read here is actually a pretty interesting case study in using AI tools for, again, some level of like hacking, right? Which again, it always feels like every time I look at something AI related, there's probably one good thing I've talked about, and the other 10 things are just actual fucking like, scummy hacks. Now, speaking of scummy hacks, as a content creator, you shouldn't really worry about this for one specific reason, ladies and gentlemen. And that specific reason is the fact that it's not something that's, probable of doing, right? Like with a 95% success rate and the fact that there are so many factors, especially for content creators, streamers, a lot of streamers will oftentimes have music playing while they actually stream as they're typing things in. So these are all data points that can harm the AI's ability to actually figure out your password. In fact, if anything, the easiest way to hack any of your streamers is probably to entice them with some crazy interesting sponsorship deal, or send the social media intern a file that just happens to launch a specific piece of malware on their system, giving up their credentials, their tokens, and lets nefarious people get access. So for instance, a couple days ago, I noticed the fellas over at Xbox on their Instagram account suddenly launched the Xbox token. Xbox enters the blockchain. We're proud to announce the launch of our official token on that Solana network. I have never in my life seen something good come out of that fucking blockchain. Let me tell you, goddamn, it is the Moss Isley of fucking crypto, is all I'll say. But obviously, no, Microsoft did not launch a crypto. Going to xboxtoken.com was not going to get you into the land of riches. If anything, some hacker got advantage and took Xbox's, massive reach and used it to shill a dog shit crypto. Even content creators like Isaiah Wendigoon, who I, would often he's actually a pretty smart guy when it comes to, computer, social media, stuff like that. But again, this just shows you not everyone is nobody is immune, right? Even I'm not immune. People like Linus Tech Tips weren't immune. People like nobody is immune to this, okay? Unless you have some severe paranoia or you lock yourself behind 10 virtual machines like I do, you're probably going to encounter a hack at some point. And obviously, I would imagine, I didn't ask about this, but I would imagine this probably happened because of a shady phishing email that was sent. Somebody tried to phish their way into Isaiah's account, and they succeeded because they launched, again, another crypto token on pump.fun. Remember that website, one of the most degenerate websites you could go to. Remember that live streaming era that happened for 2-3 days? Some of the most abhorrent shit? Yeah, they launched a token over here, and of course, the audience that Isaiah has saw it on Twitter. And of course, if you're wondering, whoa, could I get rich off of Wendicoin? Well, if you look at the 1 month statistic for Wendicoin, it's in fact cratered. In fact, we're looking at a staggering 83% loss, which is actually better than the typical 99% loss you see with 99% of the coins launched on this dogshit platform. But yeah, honestly speaking, I laughed when I kind of read this, but I really did want to talk about it because it's interesting that this kind of a hack exists. Because just speaking from a cybersecurity perspective, just speaking from where I learned and the kind of stuff that I've read over the course of, honestly, the last decade, the fact that we're at a point where AI is kind of doing this with keystrokes is not something that should scare you. It's something that you should kind of expect. People are trying to play around with a lot of these AI tools, and they're trying to figure out what the next big attack point is. Remember, I've always said cybersecurity is not like a you do it once and you forget it kind of deal. This is something that if you're a streamer, if you're somebody in the space, with how powerful local AIs are getting, and if somebody in the darker side of the internet, which I've talked about plenty of times, still do, if somebody over there creates models, creates systems that can factor in multiple keyboards, multiple strokes, and effectively pass that around as a general purpose audio hacking tool, there could be a chance that utilizing a 95% success rate, somebody might be able to get into somebody's account through sound alone. But there are ways to avoid it. Just use a fucking password manager, mute your mic, or use the most off-brand keyboard that nobody has ever heard of, okay? Simple as that. But ladies and gentlemen, that's really all I gotta say. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, hopefully you learned something. I am out.